I want to start today with something that most men feel, but very few say out loud. The performance isn't quite what it used to be. The response comes more slowly. The firmness isn't as reliable. And somewhere in the back of the mind, a quiet question has taken up residence. Is this just how it is from here? Is this the new baseline I'm supposed to accept? I'm Dr. Fernanda Oliveira, board certified urologist, and the answer to that question, in the majority of cases I see in my practice, is no. It doesn't have to be. But getting to a different answer requires understanding what is actually causing this, which is almost never what men assume it is. My dear friend, if what I just described sounds familiar, please hear this before anything else. You are not alone, not even close. This is one of the most common experiences men bring to me after 50, and it comes from men of every background, every lifestyle, every level of fitness. There is absolutely no reason to feel embarrassed or diminished by this. Your body is not failing you. It is changing, and in changing, it is asking, in the only language bodies have, for a different kind of support than it needed 20 years ago. What I want to give you today is that support. Specifically, a simple topical habit you can begin tonight that directly addresses one of the primary physical mechanisms driving these changes. Something that takes 2 to 3 minutes, costs almost nothing, and works through real biology rather than wishful thinking. But the biology comes first, because men who understand why something works are the men who stay consistent with it. And consistency, as I'll come back to near the end of this conversation, is the single variable that separates the men who improve from the men who don't. Let me tell you about a patient of mine, a man in his late 50s, someone who had been physically active for most of his adult life and who came to me genuinely puzzled. He wasn't sedentary. He wasn't dramatically overweight. He didn't smoke. His testosterone, when tested, was lower than in his 30s, but not clinically deficient. And yet, his intimate performance had been declining steadily for about 2 years. Slower response, less consistency, a growing reluctance to put himself in situations where he might experience disappointment. He had started to withdraw from intimacy, not because the desire had left him, it hadn't, but because the gap between what he wanted and what his body reliably delivered had become a source of anxiety that felt easier to avoid than to confront. When we looked carefully at his circulation specifically, at the vascular picture rather than just the hormonal one, the situation became much clearer. His blood vessels had the kind of reduced flexibility and diminished nitric oxide responsiveness that I see consistently in men in this age group who have not specifically addressed their vascular health. The infrastructure for intimate function was intact, but it was operating with significantly reduced efficiency. And the reason that mattered so specifically for what he was experiencing came down to something fundamental about how erections actually work. An erection is not primarily a hormonal event. This is the thing that surprises men most when I explain it, and it is the thing that most directly points toward the solution. Testosterone provides the underlying biological drive, the wanting, the intention, the hormonal signal that initiates the cascade. But the physical response itself, the actual mechanism of erection, is hydraulic. It depends on blood filling specific tissue in sufficient volume and under sufficient pressure to create firmness and maintain it. That filling process is governed by the nervous system and executed entirely by the circulatory system. Nitric oxide is released by the blood vessel lining, smooth muscle in the vessel walls relaxes, the vessels dilate, blood rushes in. The response that a man feels and that his partner experiences is the direct product of that vascular event occurring efficiently. When that vascular event is compromised, when nitric oxide production is reduced, when vessel walls have lost flexibility, when the circulatory pathway to erectile tissue is operating with less pressure and less responsiveness than it should, the result is exactly what my patient was describing, and exactly what you may be experiencing. Slower to respond, less complete, less reliable, not because the desire isn't there, because the delivery infrastructure has become less efficient. Think of it as water pressure in a system of pipes. The water source, your desire, your hormonal drive, hasn't changed dramatically, but the pipes themselves have narrowed slightly. The pressure has dropped. The flow that reaches the end of the line is weaker than it used to be. And no amount of wanting the water to flow harder changes what the pipes are capable of delivering in their current state. You have to address the pipes. That is exactly what the approach I'm going to share today is designed to do. And here is where something about the body's design becomes genuinely useful to us. The skin is not a barrier. It is a living, absorptive organ. Certain compounds applied topically in appropriate dilutions can penetrate the surface and influence the tissue and vessels beneath. And certain natural ingredients, ones with well-documented warming and vasodilatory properties, when applied directly to the tissue involved, create a local increase in circulation that is targeted, immediate, and distinct from anything achievable through oral supplementation alone. You are not waiting for something to be absorbed, digested, metabolized, and then delivered through the general circulation to the right location. You are placing the circulatory stimulus directly where the circulation matters most. This is not a new idea. Topical preparations have been used for circulatory support in various medical and wellness traditions for centuries. What I'm offering you today is a clinically informed version of that approach: specific ingredients, specific dilutions, specific technique, grounded in the biology of what actually happens to erectile tissue when it receives this kind of direct stimulation. The base of the preparation is coconut oil. I choose this specifically because it is skin-compatible, non-irritating to sensitive tissue at appropriate amounts, and serves as an excellent carrier. It allows the active ingredients to be applied smoothly without friction, while also providing its own mild moisturizing and skin-supportive properties. A tablespoon of good quality virgin coconut oil forms the foundation. To that base, you add ginger. And I want to be specific about this because concentration is the critical variable when working with active botanical ingredients on sensitive tissue. 1 to 2 drops of fresh ginger juice, extracted by grating a small amount of fresh ginger root and pressing it through a fine cloth, or an equivalent minimal amount of properly diluted ginger extract. The warmth you feel when ginger is applied topically is not a surface sensation. It is the reflection of genuine local vasodilation, the blood vessels in the tissue beneath the surface responding to the ginger's active compounds by relaxing and allowing increased blood flow. For tissue that has been chronically underperfused due to the circulatory decline we've been discussing, that vasodilatory stimulus is precisely the kind of targeted input it needs. Cinnamon can be added in very conservative amounts if you choose to include it. It amplifies the warming and circulatory effect. But I want to be clear that cinnamon on sensitive tissue requires more caution than ginger, and the quantity must be minimal. 1 drop of properly diluted cinnamon essential oil at most, and only after confirming that the ginger preparation alone is well tolerated. More is not better. The goal is a gentle, sustained warmth that reflects increased local circulation, not intensity, not sensation that makes you immediately aware of something happening. If you feel anything beyond mild, comfortable warmth, you have used too much and should wash the area gently with mild soap and water. Now, the massage technique itself adds a second mechanism that works in parallel with the ingredients. Gentle manual stimulation of tissue creates mechanical shear pressure on the blood vessel walls in the area. The same shear stress signal that, in larger vessels during exercise, stimulates nitric oxide production. Applied locally, this mechanical stimulus encourages the endothelial cells in the vessels of the erectile tissue to produce nitric oxide and respond with dilation. The ingredients create a chemical vasodilatory signal. The massage creates a mechanical one. Together, they work on the same biological target through complementary pathways. And there is a third dimension to this practice that I find as clinically meaningful as the first two, even though it is neurological rather than vascular. The act of performing this routine, slow, deliberate, attentive, in the quiet of the evening before bed, is itself a parasympathetic activation practice. It pulls the nervous system away from the high-alert sympathetic state of the day and toward the rest and restore mode that intimate function depends on. Cortisol begins to fall, muscle tension releases. The brain receives the signal that the demands of the day are finished, and the body's recovery systems can begin their work. And for a man whose intimate performance has been undermined in part by the chronic stress load and sympathetic dominance of daily life, which is more common than most people recognize as a contributing factor, that neurological shift is as important as the circulatory one. This is why the timing matters. Nighttime is not an arbitrary choice for this practice. The body's circulatory patterns reset during sleep. Tissue repair and vascular maintenance occur overnight. Growth hormone is released. The inflammatory processes that accumulate during the day are managed by the immune system during rest. What you do in the 30 to 45 minutes before sleep determines the conditions under which all of that overnight work occurs. And a preparation that supports local circulation, reduces pelvic tension, and activates the parasympathetic nervous system in the period immediately before sleep is positioning the body for the best possible overnight vascular recovery. My patient who came in puzzled and discouraged, after implementing this topical routine alongside the other habits I recommended for sleep and circulation support, came back 6 weeks later describing improvement that he said felt almost too simple, given how long he had been struggling. The response was coming more readily. The firmness was more consistent. The confidence that had quietly eroded over 2 years of disappointment was beginning to return. He said something I hear in versions from patients regularly, that he felt like his body was back on his side, that the experience of intimacy had stopped feeling like a test he might fail and started feeling like something he could approach with ease again. That is the outcome this kind of work is aimed at, not pharmacological suppression of a symptom. A genuine, biology-based restoration of the conditions that allow the body to function the way it was designed to. In the second half of today's conversation, I'm going to walk you through the complete application technique, exactly where, exactly how often, and the 3 mistakes that most men make when they first try this that prevent it from producing any benefit at all. One of them involves something so counterintuitive that it consistently surprises people when I explain it. Stay with me. Let's get into the part that actually matters, the specific technique, the surrounding habits, and the 3 mistakes that quietly prevent all of this from working, even when men are genuinely trying. The mistakes first, because they are the difference between a habit that produces real results and one that gets abandoned after a week with nothing to show for it. The first mistake is using too much. Too much oil, too much ginger, too much cinnamon. I want to say this as directly as possible because it is the error with the most immediate and discouraging consequence. Sensitive tissue responds to gentle stimulation with vasodilation and relaxation. It responds to excessive concentration of active botanical compounds with irritation and inflammation. And irritation is the physiological opposite of what we are trying to create. When the tissue perceives a chemical irritant, blood vessels constrict in a protective response. The pelvic muscles tighten. The nervous system activates defensively rather than relaxing. Everything the preparation was designed to support gets reversed by the excess that caused the irritation. Start with less than feels necessary. 1 to 2 drops of ginger juice in a full tablespoon of coconut oil is sufficient for initial application. The warming sensation you are looking for is mild and comfortable, a gentle, diffuse warmth that feels pleasant rather than intense. If you feel stinging, significant burning, or sharp localized sensation, wash the area immediately with mild soap and water and reduce the concentration substantially before trying again. Your tolerance may increase slightly over time as the tissue adapts, but begin conservatively and let your body guide you upward rather than starting at a level that causes a setback. The second mistake is applying too much pressure during the massage. This one is counterintuitive because our instinct when trying to influence tissue is to press firmly, to really work the area. But the mechanism we are working with here responds to light, sustained contact, not to deep pressure. The blood vessels we want to encourage toward dilation are superficial. The nervous system signal we want to activate, parasympathetic, calm, safe, is generated by gentle touch, not forceful manipulation. When you press hard, the surrounding muscles brace. Tension increases rather than decreases. The nervous system registers pressure as a demand rather than a signal to rest. and the entire intended effect is undermined by the very force you thought was helping. Use the pads of your fingers with approximately the weight you would use to touch something fragile, a sleeping child's forehead, a surface you didn't want to disturb. Slow circles, gentle and deliberate, for 2 to 3 minutes. Keep your breath slow and natural throughout. If your breathing becomes at all held or effortful, you are pressing too hard. The breath is your most reliable, real-time feedback mechanism for whether the pressure is correct. The third mistake is expecting results within the first few applications and abandoning the practice when they don't arrive. This is the mistake that costs men the most because the benefit is real and progressive, but it develops over weeks, not nights. The first few sessions establish the routine. The nervous system begins to recognize the sequence. By the end of the first week, most men notice that the practice itself feels more effective. The relaxation comes more readily. The transition towards sleep feels easier. The vascular adaptations that produce the improvements in intimate performance come later, typically in weeks 2 through 4 of consistent practice. Men who quit after 5 days are leaving before the return on their investment arrives. Commit to 3 to 4 applications per week for a minimum of 3 weeks before drawing any conclusions about whether this is working. Keep a simple mental note of how your sleep feels, how relaxed the pelvic region feels during the practice, and any changes in morning vitality or intimate response over that period. The improvements tend to be gradual and cumulative rather than dramatic and sudden, and tracking them weekly rather than nightly gives you an accurate picture of a trajectory that daily observation would miss. Now let me give you the complete application technique so that you have everything you need to begin correctly tonight. Perform this in the evening, ideally after a warm shower. The warm water beforehand creates mild vasodilation in the skin and tissue, making everything more receptive to the preparation that follows. It also signals the nervous system toward the parasympathetic state we're trying to cultivate, giving the practice a running start before you even begin. Prepare your mixture fresh each time. 1 tablespoon of virgin coconut oil, 1 to 2 drops of fresh ginger juice or minimal diluted ginger extract, and optionally 1 drop of well-diluted cinnamon essential oil if you've confirmed the ginger preparation is well tolerated. Stir thoroughly. The mixture should be at room temperature or slightly warmer. You can warm the coconut oil gently between your palms if it has solidified. Apply a small amount to the relevant tissue, less than you think you need. Begin slow, circular movements with light fingertip pressure. The motion is unhurried, attentive, and deliberate. 2 to 3 minutes is the duration. During those minutes, your breathing should remain slow and deep. Allow the pelvic floor to release with each exhale, that internal softening sensation we've discussed in previous videos. You are not working toward any particular outcome during the practice itself. You are simply providing the tissue and the nervous system with the inputs they need and allowing the body to respond in its own time. Wash your hands after finishing. Allow yourself a few minutes of continued stillness before moving into your final pre-sleep preparations. The quiet that follows the practice is part of it, giving the nervous system time to consolidate the relaxation signal rather than immediately re-engaging with stimulating activity. That is the complete physical practice. Now let me address the internal habits that determine how much that practice can contribute, because this is where the multiplier effect lives. The topical preparation supports local circulation directly, but local circulation exists within the context of systemic circulation, hormonal balance, nervous system state, and sleep quality. A 2-minute application before bed cannot fully compensate for a body whose overall circulatory health is being undermined by chronic inactivity, poor diet, disrupted sleep, and unmanaged stress. But when those surrounding systems are also being supported, the topical practice amplifies their combined effect, and the results become substantially greater than any single component would produce independently. Hydration is the most immediate internal support for circulation. Blood is largely water, and adequate daily hydration, front-loaded through the morning and early afternoon as we've discussed, ensures that the cardiovascular system is operating with sufficient fluid volume for efficient circulation everywhere in the body, including the tissue we're specifically trying to support. Dehydration, even mild, reduces blood volume and pressure throughout the system. The targeted work of the topical preparation is fighting against that deficit if you arrive at the evening insufficiently hydrated. Morning movement is the second internal amplifier. A 20 to 30-minute walk most mornings provides the sustained circulatory stimulus that drives nitric oxide production through the endothelial shear stress mechanism. This systemic nitric oxide boost creates a more favorable vascular environment throughout the day that the evening practice builds upon. Men who combine daily morning walking with the evening topical routine consistently report better results than those who use the topical preparation alone. The walk opens the system. The evening preparation targets it specifically. Together, they create a circulatory pattern across the day that supports what the body is trying to do overnight. The evening drink I recommend as a companion to this routine is warm water with a teaspoon of raw honey and a pinch of Ceylon cinnamon, taken about 45 minutes before bed. The honey provides liver glycogen support that prevents the early morning cortisol surge disrupting final sleep cycles. The cinnamon supports overnight blood sugar stability, and the warm liquid itself, taken slowly in a quiet moment, extends the parasympathetic activation that the topical practice initiates. If magnesium glycinate is appropriate for your situation, 200 to 400 milligrams alongside this drink adds smooth muscle relaxation and sleep architecture support that compounds everything else. Please discuss any supplementation with your physician if you have health conditions or take medications. The final internal factor is screens, and I keep returning to this because its impact is chronically underestimated, even by men who intellectually understand it. Blue light from screens in the evening suppresses melatonin production and maintains the brain in a state of mild cognitive arousal that works against the parasympathetic shift you are specifically trying to cultivate before sleep. The minutes you spend on your phone after the topical practice partially undo the nervous system benefit the practice just created. 30 to 60 minutes of screen-free time before bed is not optional if you want the full benefit of what we've been building. It is part of the protocol. Let me give you the complete evening as a single sequence, because seeing it whole makes each piece feel less like a separate task and more like a coherent routine. Finish dinner 2 to 3 hours before sleep. After dinner, a short walk if possible, 10 to 15 minutes, gentle pace, enough to bring the day's cortisol down and begin the circulatory transition toward rest. A warm shower about an hour before bed. Then your warm honey and cinnamon drink, taken slowly without screens. Screens off, lights dimmed. Your topical preparation, 2 to 3 minutes, gentle, attentive, unhurried. 2 minutes of quiet stillness afterward. Then sleep at a consistent time for 7 to 8 hours. That sequence, repeated with consistency 3 to 4 evenings per week, alongside daily morning movement and adequate hydration, creates a circulatory and nervous system environment that is genuinely different from what most men over 50 are currently providing their bodies. And the body responds to that difference in ways that are tangible and progressive. In the first week, the sleep improvement tends to come first. The evenings feel calmer, the transition into sleep is easier. Some men notice that the practice itself becomes something they look forward to, a few minutes of quiet self-care in an otherwise demanding day. In weeks 2 and 3, the vascular adaptations begin to manifest. Responsiveness improves. The confidence that had been quietly eroding begins to return, not from positive thinking, but from the body simply performing more reliably. By week 4, for men who have been consistent, the change in intimate experience is something they can describe clearly and specifically, rather than vaguely hoping for. One of my patients, a man in his late 50s who had been dealing with reduced performance and growing avoidance for nearly 2 years, came back after 5 weeks of this complete routine and said something I find genuinely moving every time I hear a version of it. He said the anxiety was gone. Not the desire, that had always been there. The anxiety about whether the body would cooperate. That specific, exhausting, anticipatory fear that had been making intimacy feel like a test rather than a pleasure. His body had become reliable enough, consistently enough, that the fear simply stopped having a basis. And without the fear, everything else followed naturally. That is the outcome worth working toward, not a pharmaceutical suppression of a symptom, a restored foundation from which confidence and ease can grow organically, because the body is genuinely functioning better, and the man living inside it can feel that it is. Please remember, as I always say, that this is educational information and not a substitute for medical advice. If you are experiencing significant, sudden, or persistent changes in erectile function, please see a qualified urologist. What I've described today is appropriate for the common pattern of age-related circulatory decline, not for acute or serious underlying conditions that require proper clinical evaluation. If you are starting tonight, go to the comments and type the words, "I'm starting tonight." Make that commitment visible. The men who name it follow through, and following through, here, genuinely changes things. And if this video gave you something useful today, please subscribe to this channel. Every week, honest and practical guidance to help men over 50 support their health in ways that are simple, affordable, and grounded in real biology. Your body is not broken, my friend. It is asking for better support. And now you know exactly how to give it that. I'll see you in the next one. Take good care of yourself.